So on the T-Rex podcast, we have done a lot of different things. We've talked about military history. We've interviewed guys with military experience. We have reviewed books. We've talked to the authors of books. Today, we're actually bringing all those things together. Welcome back to the T-Rex Talk podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about a book, but I'm going to be doing it with my guest. I want to introduce you Nick Slatten, who you've probably heard about in a number of different places, even if you don't immediately remember his name. You were in the news a lot in 2007. You were in the news a lot more after that, and then you were in the news a lot during 2016. And now there's a book out. This you didn't write this book, but you worked with a journalist to write this book. So welcome, Nick, to the podcast. I do recommend this book, even though you didn't write it. And I'm just really happy to have you on the show. We've been talking for a little bit about your story, and let's talk about it. Let's talk 82nd Airborne, Blackwater, federal prosecutions, presidential pardons. How do you want to start?
I'd like to start just by saying God is good. If you put your faith in Jesus, anything is possible. I don't think we can go wrong starting out with that. So.
That sounds like a great start. Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in a family that pushed military service. You know, there's a long history of service in my family. Pretty much every war, we have somebody that volunteered and stepped up. So it was a given at an early age. I wanted to be a sniper and went to infantry training, went to the 82nd, and then deployed twice to Iraq. First tour was in the Sunni Triangle. And so we were basically just tasked with rounding up all of Saddam's henchmen in the Ba'ath Party. And we would get intel that was passed down to us, specific people at specific locations, so high-value targets. And we would be farmed out, special operations. There was a few missions that were the deck of cards. They weren't high up on the deck of cards, but they were kind of in the middle. That
82nd Airborne is like very high performing non-special forces guys. So you get to kind of have a foot in both worlds at that time, right?
Oh yeah, we're blessed because the Green Berets are like right across the street. So I mean, and they're very helpful. You know, anytime you get attached to them. I remember one raid where we caught a man that was pretty high up on the deck of cards. There were just two guys that were spec ops guys. I don't know what they were. You know, they could have been CAG, they could have been agency, whatever. But they were 40. I was 19. So I was like, this is the coolest thing ever, right? And after the raid, we caught the guy. And one of the guys just called me over. He's like, hey, come here, take a knee. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he just, gave me some advice that helped me to stay alive in war. And I was just like, this dude is amazing. So I don't know who this guy is, but if he's watching, like, God bless you, because he was 40 years old and obviously a high tier operator, and he's taking time to talk to a normal infantryman, so I thought that was great.
I have a friend, his daughter's getting married today actually, but he's a Green Beret. He's a little older. He wasn't, I think he was just out by that time, so it wasn't him. But I have known a number of Green Berets who could have been any of them at that time. But so far, your story does not sound super special. There are a lot of guys in 82nd Airborne. There were a lot of guys over there in Iraq. There were a lot of guys doing that kind of work. Your story is about to get really exciting, where you join Blackwater. You're involved in some of the at the beginning. No one knows who Blackwater is. And then all of a sudden, Blackwater is the biggest, baddest, meanest, worst example of Americans that you can think of. You're right in the middle of that. And then there are criminal prosecutions, and like your story gets really, really out of control at some point. And then pardoned by the president. And once we have a different president, of course, it's a fascinating story. So where do things start to change a little bit from just your standard good regular American boy following in his family's footsteps, serving in the American military, into this very unique situation? Where do you think that actually starts to change and starts to happen?
Well, after my second tour in Iraq, I was looking to advance my career. And so I was debating to go to SFAS, which is just selection for special forces. So I was getting my packet together, and one of my former platoon sergeants, he asked me what my end goal was. And I said, well, I'd like to, work for the agency as a sniper. That's been my dream all along. And he said, well, you're going about it the wrong way. And he's like, you need to be a contractor. And I was like, I didn't really know much about private security contracting. And he explained it to me that if I worked 2 or 3 years with the State Department, I could go to the OGA vetting and try out for that. And that would be a quick way in, instead of having to go through the application process at the agency. And usually it's, you got to know somebody to get into there. So it was just an easy way to get my foot in the door. And so I went to Blackwater, and you can ask anybody that's been either through the State Department vetting, that's what I went through, or you can ask anybody that went through the OGA vetting. It is the best training that you will ever receive, because you have high-tier operators that are training you on how to do personal security protection. So the first part is just vetting. It's just go or no-go events, a lot of shooting. It's Glock 19 is what we were using at the time, and then M4, M249, M240, 203, shotgun, AK-47. So there was this just bang, 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 bang. And
everything's a test.
We lost probably a third of the class just on the vetting portion. And then they got into the meat and potatoes, which was actually teaching you how to be a personal security contractor. So I made it through that, and then they recommended me for the DDM course, which is Designated Defensive Marksman, and then graduated the DDM course and got deployed and got assigned to Raven 2-3, which is a tactical support team, basically a QRF. Most people would recognize that term, quick reaction force. So we were red detail, which basically just means you're going to go out and extract principals when they're in danger. A lot of times we would escort them to high threat venues, like if there was a
extra layer of security.
Yeah, a likely threat, we would give them, a taxi ride there. But most of the time our function was a team is in contact on venue, and we're going to extract them. So that was basically my primary function. So you got to think I'm 23 at this time. So I'm still, a youngster, and I've got all these old salty dudes that are on my team. So it was just it was an amazing experience to have that much knowledge combined. And by the time I got to Blackwater, it had streamlined so much that we had all kinds of special operation guys that basically had put aside their differences and kind of dropped their egos at the door and said, what worked in your unit and what did not work in your unit. And they just used what worked and got rid of the nonsense. And so by the time I got there, it was an amazing work environment. And they welcomed me. I was intimidated. I was an infantry guy. I wasn't nothing special. And they welcomed me right in. And then immediately, January 23rd happened. And that was a day where...
and what year was this? This is the Little Bird went down, 2007.
Yeah, so that was the worst day of my life, for sure.
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit, because private military companies, mercenaries, are nothing new. They've been around since as long as there's been fighting. But the United States usually hasn't done a lot of stuff with contractors. We've always had either volunteer military, we've had the draft, but we haven't really done a whole lot with mercenary armies as a nation, a relatively young nation. And what was happening at that time with private military companies is just a really interesting thing. There was a fascinating sort of, I don't even know the best way to put it, but it's kind of like opening a can of worms in many ways. We had so much going on after we started the global war on terror. We started doing, as a nation, as the State Department and other entities, the blob just ran it very differently than, say, previous Iraqi wars. and even recent Gulf War stuff. So, what was the general thought like of your 82nd Airborne guys? Like, what were your other military brothers thinking about these private military companies in general? And then Blackwater is like the professionals. Blackwater is the really serious, like the big leagues. What was the general thought about that at the time as this is developing in the early 2000s?
I think that at first it was very well received. And then as more and more companies were getting contracts, there were contracts for everything. Static security, escorting food products. So it was almost like the gold rush, they called it.
Yeah.
And so you'd have all these contracting companies that would not have as good of training that we had. And a lot of times when they would get in a jam or they would get in trouble, they would just say that they were Blackwater. And anyone that is Blackwater does not say that they're Blackwater. They say BW. So that's a really, really good way to tell if somebody's Blackwater or not. And be like, yeah, I was BW. Like I wasn't Blackwater. So you'd have all these false flagging people. I've actually had guys tell me that they were Blackwater, and I've actually had guys tell me that they were Raven 2-3 before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
interesting.
So you had a lot of that where it was false flags, and Blackwater kind of got a bad name of being heavy-handed and stuff like that. And
also the market leader always gets a little bit more negative attention too in those sorts of situations, because you also have people that are anti-private military companies, and then there's one big obvious target. And then you got all the competitors are just kind of gunning for those contracts, because that's the beauty of contracting is everybody has access to the contracts. Everybody tries to get them any way that they can. But it is fascinating. We have as a country, there have always been contractors. We've always hired local people to do certain things, truck driving, support roles of various types. But the security that's going to have direct enemy contact, I think that was kind of a new thing at that time, that was a place where we were going to start using contractors as opposed to enlisted actual U.S. military personnel. And as I've studied this, I really think there are kind of two main drivers for it. And one of them was it looks so much better in the when you're reporting on this war to be able to say no military personnel were harmed here, or only so many military personnel died this month. It's much easier to give those jobs to folks that you don't have to make publicly available reports about. And then on the contractor side, I really believe, talking to folks who were in at the time, the U.S. military was getting bogged down by a number of different things. And there was a lot of the guys that I know that were in contracting really appreciated a little bit more of a free market mindset, a little bit more flexibility. Guys who were able to, had built up their skills and were able to apply them a little bit more without as much bureaucracy, without as much red tape. So I can see both sides. The bureaucracy is saying, yes, contracting is the way forwards. And also people who hate bureaucracy saying, yes, contracting is the way forward. This kind of perfect storm of things going on right at that, early 2000s time is just geopolitically interesting too. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. The way that they trained us also, I feel like, was on a whole different level. Prince would hire the entire town of Moyock, North Carolina to be role players.
Yes.
In the scenarios. So you would have a whole city that was, running scenarios, and the tier 1 instructors would be the insurgents. And so it was just, your level of training was totally different, and they could do it way more cost effective than the actual military could do it. So I think that was the big driving factor that Prince could push out a product that was better and for less cost. Because the military had their offensive operations. We were more of a defensive operation. I was kind of on an offensive team as far as having to go into contact to extract principals, but our primary function was just protect diplomats.
Yeah.
So that's something that the Army would have had to train up on and learn to be defensive versus offensive. So it was a
perfect place to put.
Yeah, it was a great
specialists.
fit.
Yeah. So you go in and you have prior military experience, and then you're working with guys who are also, at this point, were they all prior military experience? Other guys in Blackwater that you were working with?
Yes.
I know later on they started to add some law enforcement specialists and people with some other specialties, but
I think law enforcement, the ones that did make it through the vetting, they had like a additional training that they had to complete beforehand. Yeah. So by the time I seen a couple of those guys, but by the time they got there, they were squared away. Yep. I mean, I never seen any problems out of those guys. There was a few of them that showed up when we were getting rocketed heavily, and they're like, "Is this how it is all the time?" And we're like, "Yes." And some of them went home, but like, they're like, "This ain't for me." But for the most part, those guys were just as hard and just as switched on as anybody else, in my opinion. So
yeah, and they bring an additional set of skills. One of the things that I heard at the time was cops don't know how to shoot and soldiers don't know how to drive. So you gotta put them together. That was actually a little later than that. But let's go back to January 23rd, because this is when you've already been over there. You kind of know your way around. And how long had you been in the area at that time?
Let's see. I got there at the end of October, so a few months. And I was a machine gunner at this point. We were only slotted one DDM per team. So we already had a DDM on our team. And they figured out very quickly that they wanted me in a position where I could shoot. So they put me up in the up gun. And I was in the second vehicle, lead gunner. And it was just a normal day. There was a few teams out at really high threat venues. And one of the teams on venue, they reported receiving contact at venue. And so we were tasked with extract the principal from the venue. And en route, we were ambushed. And the lead vehicle, the vehicle in front of me, their tire was shot out in the ambush. We fought our way through that ambush and set up in an easily defensible position where we could execute a tire change. And by the time we got the tire on, we had a new mission. One of our little birds had been shot down. What had happened, and we didn't get all this intel until later on, but what had happened is little birds always travel in pairs. So one of the door gunners had taken a stray round to the head. So it was just a lucky shot. He got hit in the head, and it killed him instantly. And so they flew him back to the cache for medical attention, while the other little bird was faced with a choice. They could stay on venue and provide close air support for the team that was in contact, or they could ride back with their boys to the cache. Well, you know what they did? They elected to stay behind with the team that was in trouble. And unfortunately, they were shot down and killed. And so we get this mission, and it's aircraft recovery and body recovery. We're hoping they're alive, but at the time when they gave us the grid, it was over the river, and it was a little bit north of Al Fado. Anybody that's ever been to Baghdad knows that Al Fado and Sadr City's like bad places to be. So it was really turned up. Pretty much every road we went down, we got ambushed. I remember going through 5 different ambushes before we even made it to the crash site. So we were getting shot all to pieces. It was like every road dead-ended at the river. So it was like a cul-de-sac road. You had to like traffic circle it around it. So you'd ride down through the ambush, get shot all to pieces, have to shoot back, and then you'd have to make that loop and go back down the same road you came. So, but if you listen to another one of my friends, I heard him tell the story. He said we went through 10 different ambushes. So, I mean, war is crazy, and it was just a lot of killing and a lot of mayhem just to even get to the crash site. And once we made it to the crash site, we couldn't get to the bird immediately. because they had shot that helicopter down with the ADA gun, which is an air defense artillery gun, big bullets, right? And they had figured out a way to direct lay it, which just means point it down street level.
Yeah.
And so they had that alleyway just chewed up. And so we could not get down to the crash site. So we fought for 3.5 hours on site before we could even get down there to extract our guys. And I remember one point in the gunfight when a round hit in between my vehicle and the lead vehicle, and I called out on the radio, there's a sniper, and then another round hit my vehicle. So I was like, man, this dude is just making his adjustments. He's dialing in on me, and I could just like, in my own head, I could picture myself being in his crosshairs, and I was like, man, I'm going to die right here. And I remember calling out, I'm shooting at where I think he's at, and my buddy in the lead vehicle, he's shooting at where he thinks he's at. And I remember calling out to God in that moment. I don't know if I said it out loud or just in my heart, but I was like, God, help me. And I don't even think I got me out. And Hellfire missile went into I think it was the 4th floor, and then one went into the 2nd floor. And so it kind of just pancaked the 3rd floor. And I don't know who that Apache pilot was, but I'm grateful. Like I said, I hope he's watching this because I want to say thank you, because he definitely saved me. So,
Yeah.
And then that really turned the tide, because the Army was there supporting us, and they were from Washington. I think that was 2nd Infantry Division. They were there, and they really helped us out a lot in that gun battle. And the Apache pilots, they just completely turned the tide in that battle. And so when the Apache showed up, it wasn't too long after that we were able to start maneuvering on that position, and they blew up the ADA gun position, and we were able to get our guys out.
Yeah.
And so when we were loaded up the guys, our brothers, in body bags, and we were dragging them out, one of the pilots, Art Laguna, I went through whips with him, which was the original vetting course for Blackwater. He was a really good guy. He's a Desert Storm pilot. He was the one that got killed, and his brother just so happened to be on Blackwater Air as well. And so he's out there flying support as well, trying to find his brother, obviously. And so he just lands in the middle of this gunfight. Wow. And he wants to see that it's his brother. So he unzips the bag, and he looks, and he positively identifies that it is his brother, and zips it back up. And we load it up in the truck, load Art's remains up in the truck. And it was just a crazy moment in that fight. And then they just immediately fly back up, and they start laying down suppressive fire for us, And so it was the worst day of my life for sure, seeing... And I saw so many people just laying down their lives to try to get my boys back. And like I want to say, it was the 2nd Infantry Division, and whatever that unit was that was in the Apaches, whoever they were. I just want to say thanks. Yeah. Because, I mean, they were awesome.
How often, because not every mission went bad, not everything turned into a shooting war, but how often did you guys end up working alongside or getting support from the military? How often did that actually, because you're always doing State Department stuff, so you're always connected in some way, mission wise, but how often do you actually get live rounds from the U.S. military when you need them?
Pretty often, because that was the troop surge. Yeah. So there were infantrymen everywhere. So that's funny you say that, because
I hear journalists say both things, like, oh no, it's only, we're only hiring these guys to go off and do lone assassin missions. They never actually are side to side with American soldiers.
No, we weren't doing that. No. The next significant incident was shortly thereafter in February. It's called the Central Rail Station incident, and the Iraqi army opened up on our DDMs on the roof and shot one of them through the wall. It was actually with the 50 cal, and he survived. It wedged in his hip, And the other DDM on the roof was a guy that I went to the DDM course with, and he did a really good job. Like he was laying them down, and we rolled up, and the Iraqi army didn't even see us coming. They were just so tunnel vision on that rooftop, and they were laying it down. And we just rolled in, and a firefight broke out, and we were able to extract the principal. And I can remember that it was taking too long. And this incident, I was in the third vehicle, and the third vehicle only had one turret. And it was a Bearcat, which the State Department was really pushing on us, but those were like the worst vehicles you could have. It's like what you see the local SWAT teams have and stuff. Flat-sided, terrible for combat, You want angled sides so that if something hits it, it doesn't just destroy you. But the cool thing about it was it had two doors that opened up wide. And so I call on the radio, and I'm like, because the PSD team was not going to bring the principal out until we had suppressed everyone. And I was just like, let's back up to the door, because there was a lot of space in between us and the doorway. So we opened the back doors and was able to just sandwich the vehicle against the door, and they just chucked the guy in. And so, like you say, how often were we working with military? This dude was a Marine colonel. And I can remember him being right up against my leg. And I'm on the 240 shooting, and I kick this dude, and then he's like, and I look down and I see the full bird on his helmet, and I'm like, oh crap, I just kicked the colonel, but they wrote us a nice letter, he wrote us a nice letter that thank you for extracting us, and then May 23rd, that was another significant incident where you were talking about military supporting us or us supporting military. We had been in the gunfight for maybe 10 minutes, and my old unit showed up. So it wasn't my company, it was Charlie Company, but I was in Alpha Company. But first of the 504, they showed up and supported our left flank for about 25 minutes in an engagement. So, they were just laying it down with the 50 cals and the AT4s and stuff. So, they were always there. And it's like a lot of times we would just get a call that, a squad is pinned down and any station this net, and they would be just a couple blocks away. So we would respond, and the government actually used that against us to prosecute us because technically we had diplomatic immunity. And so they were like, MEJA does not apply to these guys because they helped the DOD. They supported their mission. So they used the fact that we actually stopped and helped Marines and Army infantry personnel that were in active engagements that we stopped and provided support. They used that against us to actually prosecute us. So I thought that was pretty messed up.
That's very interesting. We'll get to the prosecution, but I find this period of history fascinating for a bunch of reasons. But one of them is, as we talk about citizen defense industry, we talk about the private citizen's responsibility to be ready for more than just self-defense, but actually be thinking more about home defense and community defense. There have been, throughout all of history, situations where the organized militia and the unorganized militia have to work together, and where serious, complicated, fully papered state actors are working with private companies. Like these, it's impossible not to have this. We like to pretend that it can always be clean and dried, and military and non-military can always be this super separated bright line, but it never actually works out that way. There's always private Lockheed Martin people on board trying to troubleshoot a thing that they made for the government that civilian contractors built and designed and congressmen paid for, and our tax dollars are involved in, and you were in and now you're out. But there's it's never clean, it's never nice. So instead of pretending like it is, and then when it's messy, getting angry at whoever was near the mess, I think it's better to understand this situation properly and build systems that actually work. So you're in the story, you're about to get in a whole heap of trouble, but when did that actually start? Because up until this time, continuing on from this time, Blackwater has an amazing, unimpeachable record of never losing a principal, which is unheard of and also kind of just unbelievable to me. So
Yeah, that's right.
all the criticisms of Blackwater, and there are many coming from all these different quarters for all these different reasons, everything up to and including helping people. How dare you? How dare you help people with their mission? That perfect record of taking care of principals and protecting them and extracting them is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, for the people that don't know what a principal is, it's just the very important person, the VIP, the person that we are tasked with. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our guys laid their lives down. And I really feel like that those guys that died January 23rd, they died protecting that lady. I still can't mention her name. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's like most people don't know that story.
Right. Most
people have never heard of January 23rd incident in 2007. You know, they've never heard of that. But that was a constant thing where our guys were putting their lives on the line for these diplomats. Mm-hmm. And it just continued on from there. It seemed like the month of September really took it up a notch. So we had 4 incidents just back to back. So one was what's considered the Amanat City Hall incident, and that was where similar thing, team in contact on venue. We went to extract the team, and it was a well-organized militia, and they were set up. It was crazy. They were so comfortable in that area around Fodle that they were just chilling out. When we got there, they were drinking tea. There were some guys like pulling security, but they had their guns just like, we own this block kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
And so it was insane, the attitude that they had towards us. And we found out later that a lot of those guys were Syrian. You know, a lot of the army would come in after...
everybody was doing a troop surge.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't just the Americans doing the troop surge. It was also everyone that wanted to kill an American was coming over there. And so we got into a big engagement there, and it was a mix of just people full kitted out versus also Iraqi army were participating, actively engaging us. So it was a mess, right? We fought for about 25 minutes to get that principal off of venue, and then when we did, we made it back, and traffic was jammed across the bridge. And so they had multi-layered ambushes set up. First, they set us up in an L, which is a common tactic. They'll set you up in an L-shaped ambush, and so you usually don't survive an L-shaped ambush, but our guys that were on the machine guns were spot on that day. I was actually in the DDM role that day, but they immediately sniffed it out, and they immediately were able to neutralize the threats. And we fought and got the principal in our motorcade, but when we got across the river, traffic had come to a standstill. And anybody that's ever been to Baghdad, I can try to paint a picture. It's for the people that haven't, it's like a Walmart parking lot all the time, like on Black Friday. I mean, just traffic jam, right? And so there's this traffic jam on the other side of the bridge, and we're having to navigate our way through it. So we're getting shot at, and we're having to engage. And I remember getting shot at and having to engage, and then they're like, get out of the vehicles and clear traffic. And we're like, crap. So it was like jumping out of the vehicles, engaging, clearing the traffic, sending the traffic, making a way for us to get through, and got that principal back home safe. But it was just a constant barrage of, that would be our day job, right? And then at night, there would be a constant barrage of rocket attacks in the green zone. So, like, I feel sorry for those people that, you know, they just lived in the green zone, because you hear green zone and you think safe, right? No. At night, it was turned all the way up. They would rocket that place, and there were just hundreds of people getting injured, and multiple people getting killed every single night. And we were tasked with going out and rendering aid and body collection. Yeah. So that was another really stressful part of the job. So it just ratcheted all the way up. And then after Amanat City Hall, we get a call they elected me as the designated marksman for the DART team. And DART just means Downed Aircraft Recovery Team.
Yeah.
And so the only mission that I got to go on with them, we use 412s, so that's like a Huey.
Yeah.
And they were medium transport. They were bringing people from our satellite site from a sister camp down in Hilla, and they were flying them up to Baghdad so that they could go on vacation. And one of the Hueys got shot down by an RPG. And so, like I said, they always travel in pairs. They were able to land and cross-load the people that were injured, and no one got killed, thank God. And they got all them on board. And so we were kind of like, well, what's our mission? And they're like, just secure the crash site. We're going to send mechanics out to take the sensitive items off the crash site. We were trying to get them just to blow it up. You know, like you got the Army out there.
Faster, cleaner,
safer.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we want our stuff back. So we went out there basically for risking our life for equipment. And so we fly out. It was about a 10-minute flight south of Baghdad. This little village. There were two villages. There was one that was like 600 yards away. That's what I was focused on because that was my sniper rifle's capabilities was, about the 800 to 900 yards with that SR-25. I was focused on that. The Army team was already on site. It was a hot LZ. When we landed, they were already engaging insurgents, and the Apaches were engaging. And they had to quit engaging because the insurgents were using their wife and kids as human shields. And so it was really hectic. There was there was a big crowd of people that were making their way from the further village, which was about 1,200 yards away, through the tree line that separated the two villages. And then you had a 600-yard away village from the site. And I remember taking up position where the bird had crashed, and it cut this big trench out. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a helicopter go down, but it's crazy how it comes apart, and it wrecks the ground. So it was a perfect fighting position for me. I remember putting my bipod legs down, and my bipod sunk all the way to the sand. So it was just like super stable. Like I couldn't have picked a better spot, right? And so we set up there, and it was immediately on. Within a couple of minutes, we were engaging, and somewhere in the middle of that gunfight, the mechanics show up, and under fire, I remember these mechanics, they're engaging while they're stripping these parts off this bird. And I was just so impressed with our mechanics, because they're not, their vetting course is a little different, but they were fighting back too. So I was impressed, they really distinguished themselves with bravery, I felt like, in that situation. And there was a local infantry unit there. Man, I can't remember where they were from. But anyway, they had a minesweeping vehicle, they had a Humvee, and then we had Apache support. And so eventually what happened, the Apaches ended up leveling the building and the tree line. And we were able to get out of there. No one got hurt. I think one person got a shrapnel from a round strike I think it hit the bird and it cut his face, but there wasn't nothing significant that happened. We were able to extract out of there and got everybody back and got their precious equipment back to them. So that was an interesting one. And then the one you were talking about where we got in trouble, we can get into that if you want to.
Yeah. Now, at this point, I'm trying to play in my mind chronologically what's happening at your end, and then what's chronologically happening back in the States. There hasn't been a ton of press about the private military companies yet at this point. There have been a few articles like, oh, this is interesting. Thinking men's magazines are writing articles about these, but they're not front page news.
Right.
But there is kind of a air of, I don't even know exactly the best way to describe it, but there's definitely some skepticism and stuff that is brewing. And Blackwater guys had been involved in some life-saving operations and then also some securing areas of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. that was a really interesting one because as Hurricane Katrina is coming, if I'm remembering the story correctly, Eric Prince has just bought a couple of new aircraft and they're on their way to Moyock. And when he hears about the projections for the hurricane, he says, hey, send those vehicles back towards a safe place that they can operate out of near Katrina. We will help. We don't know what the issue is going to be yet, and we don't have the permission yet, but you just turn around and you just fly in that direction, and we will secure the permissions before you get there. So that was very much, his mode of operations.
He's very forward thinking for sure.
Yes. And also very, I would say, private military business is very profitable. A lot of people get into it because they are interested in the money. But having watched his family over the years, I would say also very selfless to just say, nope, there's going to be needs. People are going to have needs in New Orleans, and we're going to send assets there. We don't have contracts. We don't have paying gigs lined up. We may not get paid, but people will need us. So we're just going to send units there. We're going to be ready. Right. So I think that also annoyed a lot of people, that these weird private military companies are doing private security gigs locally as well as internationally. So I think that there were a lot of people that had a bone to pick with him in 2006 and in 2007. And in hindsight now, looking back, I think people were waiting for something that could be weaponized against the company. So that is how I remember things. Man, it's been a few years,
long time ago.
But that is how I remember things kind of brewing at that time, end of 2006, beginning of 2007. So yeah. So then how are things back in the sandbox?
So this is probably the third worst day of my life. I would say January 23rd was the worst day of my life. And obviously September 11th was the second worst day. This is probably the third worst day of my life just because of what followed. But it was a normal day, we had actually been in so many engagements in such a short time. And I think the day before this, one of our sister teams had taken an EFP, and we got called out to that. But by the time we got to that area, they had already sanitized and they were squared away. They had already handled everything. But it was just a day off. They were like, just relax. You're getting a day off of work. And usually on our days off, we would just train. And if anybody needed a ride to the airport, we would just provide security for them to go to BIOP. But we were in the chow hall. Most of the team was in the chow hall eating, and there was an explosion. And we hear on our radios that VBID detonated. The team is hit with VBID. And then they were like, send help. Mm-hmm. And next thing I know is I'm sprinting to the trucks, and we've got our kit staged in the trucks, and we're getting kitted up, and we're rolling towards the checkpoint. So we're expecting, people in up-armored Suburbans to be sprawled out everywhere, to be, that got hit with a VBID. But what had happened was they had detonated outside the gate. So we didn't have that actual intelligence yet. But we were going, and there was some back and forth about whether or not we actually had permission. They used this against us in trial. They said that we didn't have permission to leave the green zone. But the way that we were taught is once we were kitted up and once we were in the vehicle, the tactical commander had say-so on whether or not we departed, because you can see things on the ground that the TOC people sitting behind a desk can't see. Yes, so there was a lot of times when they'd tell us on January 23rd, they're like, break contact and return to base whenever you can. And finally we were like, just shut up, dude. Like, you don't know what's going on here. Yeah. So it was just like, it was one of those situations where he made the call, the shift lead, and we went out there. And I don't know if the Iraqi police and military presence was so heavy just because a bomb had detonated less than a mile away. But anybody that's been through that square, it's called Nisoor Square, it's very crowded always. And that point in time, one of the entryways, which is like a tunnel, goes underneath the square. It was under construction, so it was even more crowded. There had been a car bomb that had detonated there in April, so they were still doing construction on it. So it was just jam-packed, and basically they told us to clear a path for the PSD team to return to the green zone. And so we set up, and we were sending traffic through, and we were stopping traffic on this side, and we weren't there for maybe a minute, and it just broke out. And Iraqi cops are, at first they're just kind of holding their guns like this, and then they're shouldering them, and then they're starting to raise them, and then it was just on after that. And so it was maybe a 2-minute engagement. And that's the thing that really blew my mind, how this blew up into such a big ordeal. It was over before it started. You know, we completely squashed the threat that was there to ambush us. And on a AAR, we'd always do after action reviews anytime we got an engagement. They had a big city bus on one side of the circle, and then they had a big water truck on the other side of the circle. And what we really believed, this was a kidnapping attempt. They were going to get those up-armored Suburbans in the bend of that traffic circle, and then they were just going to block off.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so then all you got to do is set the up-armored zone fire.
Yeah.
And then they've got a choice. They can either get out of the vehicle or they can cook. And so that's what we really believed. But they didn't expect high-profile vehicles that are bigger than Humvees with 2 machine gunners and most of the turrets to roll up into their ambush. And I believe they just were like, forget it. And they prematurely, just initiated the ambush. And so our vehicle that I was in, it got shot up so bad that we had to be towed out. So around... went off the pavement, hit the differential, went up through the radiator. It was in the Bearcat. Like I said, that vehicle sucks. I don't care who's listening.
You mentioned some of the issues with the Armor 4. I was going to mention some issues with the cooling system and so forth, but no, you're ahead of me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, within 20 seconds of bullets going back and forth, the vehicle in front of us, they call us and they're like, hey, y'all are leaking a lot of coolant. And by the time they said that, our vehicle just shuts down. Those old school South African fighting vehicles that we had, man, you want to talk about some really hardcore Mad Max type vehicles, because they could be bones dry on oil or any kind of fluid, and they would run until they explode.
They will kill themselves.
Yeah, so it was
no
like
safety. Yeah.
This thing just shut off to preserve the engine, right? And so we're just stuck out there. And I was like, man, we are dead. Because, everybody that knows anything about combat is you want to get off the X, or you want to assault forward. But so we had to fight and execute a tow out, which basically we're here, second vehicle backs up to the third vehicle, fourth vehicle drives up to the contact side. So we were taking contact from this side, and then they dismount troops so that they can hook up the tow strap. And then we get towed off the scene. And, we didn't think it was a big deal until we got back to base. And then we go back into the chow hall because all of us literally just dropped our lunch and left. So they were getting us more lunch, and it's on CNN within like 30 minutes. I remember we got new trucks because that one was damaged, cross-loaded all of our ammo and all of our kit to a new vehicle. And by that time that it took us to do that, 30 minutes, maybe an hour at the most,
big story.
It was already on CNN, and they were running a loop. And then, if there was ever a dead news day, where there wasn't much going on, they'd run that same loop. So it was like a week straight of just us on CNN. So I was like, this is bad.
Yeah. Where did the footage necessarily come from? Because you've been operating over there for a long time. There's much bigger, more dramatic, cinematic kind of action taking place. But my theory is people were already looking for an excuse. They were already looking for an opportunity. But what do you know about, what triggered this to become the infamous massacre?
So my take on it was, they were telling the American public, the troop surge is working. because you remember a lot of people were getting stop lost. A lot of people were getting called back from that IRR.
Yes.
You know, like you
Yes.
sign up for 4 years, but you owe them an additional 4 years if you get out, if they ever need it. So they were calling up those guys first. They're like, this is working, when really it was making it way more violent than it was in 2006. So the troop surge was an utter failure as far as making Baghdad a safer city. And I think that because it was an engagement with Iraqi police who are supposed to be on our side,
it just looks bad on a bunch of levels.
It put a big spotlight on all the flaws, and like the lead Iraqi investigator, who basically the FBI ended up taking all the intelligence that he was giving them, all the investigation, all the witness statements. The FBI took his word, and he was a terrorist. He was selling troop movements of American soldiers to Iran.
Yeah.
So this is the person that the FBI is holding up as this guy is like investigating. This guy is finding out the truth. And so
it's very complicated.
I think it was just a big, like you said, we were an easy target as far as Blackwater. There was a lot of people in.
By then, every reporter had heard of you. It was not interesting, but everyone knew. Yeah.
A lot of people were in politics, you know, a lot of people were outspoken against us and wanted us out of there, basically. And I just feel like that was the tipping point for people just to point their finger and be like, I told you so, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's another aspect to this too, because not only is Eric Prince kind of this divisive figure inside of the, inside and outside of the military industrial complex, State Department, intelligence services blob. His dad was a very, very successful businessman who had donated a lot of money to a bunch of conservative think tanks in Washington, D.C. My dad was involved as a different kind of contractor, but he was a video producer and worked with a whole bunch of those think tanks, and he knew Eric Prince's dad. And so there were already people that had opinions about the Prince family even before any of this appeared. So actually, that's when we got involved. That's when we started paying closer attention to the story. This is the first time we heard about it. Dad was like, "Oh, we should contact them." So we went down to Mayock. This would have been later in 2007. I can't remember the exact date, and said like, "Hey, is there anything we can do? You have a PR disaster and a bunch of other things going on, and people are trying to spin this up into something. They're trying really, really hard to make hay out of this. Is there anything we can do to help?" And so at that point, I think the powerful enemies had already come out. There wasn't really that much to do. But yeah, we headed down to Mayock and talked to some folks there, and ended up not doing anything to help, because I don't think there was much that could help. Although I did end up making some marketing materials for the Grizzly vehicle that Blackwater made, which is much better than a Bearcat. Just much better than a Bearcat. If they were allowed to, still make those anymore, I would continue marketing for them for free, because it's anyway.
But Gina, she does an awesome job getting into the weeds on all that stuff.
I'm really looking forward to
the legalities and why behind it, because that's the question. Why would they do that, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't just a PR hit piece. Yeah. It turned into a major prosecutorial endeavor, which was pointed very, very much at you. And
I did 6 years and 3 months in prison over it.
So let's go back to your side of the story. You get back to base, set up a vehicle, try to finish your lunch. You see it on CNN, and you, at this point, that's very abnormal. So you know that this is bad, that it's on CNN. But at what point did you realize that it wasn't just a PR story? Powerful, mechanical things had been put into motion already.
So the State Department always had us do reports anytime we used our weapon system. And so this time it was more of an interview. than a report. And so they called us over to the embassy, which was unusual. So that already had me kind of like, this is not right.
Yeah.
And the investigators, they were trying to like basically interrogate us, it seemed like. And so members of our team basically got fed up with them because they sit behind a desk and they don't go out and fight, So we're like, these are the locations on the map that we were getting shot at from. So why don't you get out from behind your desk and go out there and look? We were very, and that's the thing. Like the State Department hated us, and we weren't too fond of them either.
Even though you were protecting the diplomats.
It's odd, right? I think they were. I don't know what it was, but they didn't like us. They called us knuckle draggers or window lickers or whatever, but they did not like us. And
I have some theories, but we'll cut
But anyway, so like we showed them specific locations on the map, and they go out there the very next day, and guess what they find at these specific locations that we showed them?
Well, I would expect to find shell casings and...
They find expended AK-47 shell casings and RPK and PKM shell casings. And it was like exactly where we were saying here and here and here.
Yeah.
And so within minutes, they get an Army escort to go out there. Within minutes, they're like, this is a clean shoot. And so for whatever reason, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't a thorough enough investigation.
Yeah. So the biased State Department guys who already don't like you exonerate you.
They did. They cleared us. And so we were fit to go back to work immediately. So I thought it was done. And then we get a memo that's like, all right, we're going to stand down for safety. We stand down for safety, and then it's like, all right, the FBI is coming. And then that's when it was time for me to go home, because I knew once they got involved that it was, if you're not going to take the State Department's word, like you said, they don't like us. They're professional investigators. That's what they do. And then they actually go out to the scene and investigate it. I think that was actually the first time in the entire war that they actually went out and investigated a scene.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yes, this is a legitimate shoot. And that wasn't good enough for the powers that be. And the feds come in. It was almost a month later. I think it was 4 weeks later they come in, and they link right up with that Iraqi colonel who's in charge of that Iraqi police force, the same police force that was actively shooting at us.
Right. Yeah.
And they just adopt his assessment of what happened as a gospel truth. And in that 4-week time frame, they had ran ads on the local television that was like, hey, if you were shot, or someone who was shot, or if you were injured, or if you got family that were dead, come to the Green Zone and we'll give you money. So they had like hundreds of people that were showing up that was like, oh yeah, this and that.
Yeah.
And like some of the people that my brothers got convicted of killing were like a mile away.
Yeah.
They died at a different checkpoint, or they died under a different bridge. And then there some people that they got charged and convicted of killing. This was the testimony of the witness. Be like, yes, my relative went through Nisoor Square every day between the hours of noon and 3 p.m., and he did not come home. And they got convicted of killing him. Like there was no evidence. Like none of this would have held up.
Yeah.
In a real court. So it was a kangaroo court. The judge was like bought and paid for. But I mean,
you went to court many times.
Yeah, the first time, we had a legit judge. It was 2009. Urbina was his name, and he was a liberal judge. But so I'm like, yeah, we're hit. We got a liberal judge. But he was like, I want to see all the evidence, even the classified stuff. And when he got into it all, with regards to me, he was like, didn't he do his job? And the government was like, yeah, we admit the evidence against Mr. Slatten is weak. The government indicted me, ruined my career, put my face on every front page.
Yeah.
And they admitted that the evidence was weak for an indictment. And anybody that knows anything about the indictment process, it's really easy to indict somebody if you want to. And then for my brothers, they admitted that they violated their constitutional rights over and over again. So the judge just threw it out.
Yeah.
And then that was the time when Obama was taking over office. And then you can look that clip up where basically Obama got Afghanistan. He gave Iraq to Biden. And Biden, Vice President of the United States at the time, is standing right next to the Prime Minister of Iraq. And he says he doesn't even know the name of the square. He calls it Nisoor, not Nisoor. But he says that...
He was getting names wrong even back then.
Yeah, he said acquittal, or he said dismissal is not acquittal. The Justice Department will make sure that these Iraqis receive justice. And so I remember seeing that on TV, and I was like, oh, man, we are hit, you know. And so they brought it back, even after it had been dismissed. And
so there's a State Department dismissal, judge dismissal, but Vice President brings it back up.
And then by 2014, we were convicted. So it took that long from the original, I think the original indictments were like 2008. It was dismissed in 2009. And then they took them till about, 2014 to get us locked up. And so we do, my case is crazy because we won our direct appeal. You know, everybody that is in the federal system gets a direct appeal. The judges ruled that Mr. Slatten probably did not do it. So that's reasonable doubt. They should have just kicked it all the way out. They should have just let me go home. But instead they gave the government an option to retry me, which of course they did.
So trial number 3 now.
And of course they didn't let me out on my own recognizance like I was the first trial. So I'm having to fight this case from being incarcerated. And it's a lot harder. Anybody that's ever been through the legal process knows that it's much easier to fight your case when you're on the street than it is when you're incarcerated. So, and they were making it hard on me. You know, they were putting me in real bad situations, trying to get me hurt, trying to get me to hurt people. And it was a really hard time, but it really strengthened my faith in God. Like the whole time, they meant it for harm, but I really feel like God meant it for good.
Well, let's go back. That reminds me, I was going to ask you about this. Let's go back to January 23rd, where you can feel that sniper honing in on you and you cry out to the Lord. Were you already a Christian at this point? Where were you at in your, with your faith?
I was saved at an early age, but like many people, I feel like when they get saved young, they don't fully understand the implications behind that and truly understand it. And so I rebelled, obviously, and I was not always living the way that I should. And it seemed like the only time that I was calling out to God was when I was in a jam. And I can remember leaving the green zone. There are multiple, anybody that's been there, there's multiple speed bumps when you leave. And those speed bumps were like a jarring reminder for me, you best be praying right now. And so like that was always my prayer time on the way out. And it took going to prison for me to actually seek the Lord with my whole heart and read the word and to pray. And, you know, they meant it for harm, but it was for my benefit. Like, I really feel like that it was a blessing. I feel like those 6 years and 3 months were a blessing from God because I would not be the man I am today, and I would not have the walk with Jesus Christ that I have now if it wasn't for that time in prison. So, I mean, you know, time is different for God than it is for us. And so he knew exactly what I needed. He's a good dad. So he knew exactly what I needed. And so like they did everything they could. You know, we were talking about, I won my appeal. And so I had to go back for a second trial. And in my second trial, it was like $10 million worth of lawyers came on my case for free to represent me. And so I had this dream team of legal experts, and they crushed the government in the second trial. And so the jury hung, and all kinds of things came out in the second trial that didn't come out in the first trial, like the fact that the lead Iraqi investigator is a terrorist.
And he had to be flown out of the country, if I remember. Yeah,
the day before he was set to testify during the first trial, they
said, whoops.
got him out in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And so they never disclosed that. And then another thing that I always thought was very interesting, the guy that I was accused of killing, his dad, the government reached out to him by email and was like, hey, you know, Nick Slatten got a new trial. We're asking you to come testify against him. He responded and said, you have told me for years that someone killed my son other than him and that someone killed my wife other than him. He goes, I'm not taking part in this play, is what he called it.
Oh,
and so,
interesting. Yeah.
And so we've got this email, but I can't show it to my jury. But I have no subpoena powers over this man because he's an Iraqi citizen. I can't subpoena him to come to court. So you'd think that if you were sitting as one of my jurors, you would want to know the fact that the guy's daddy refused to testify because the government said somebody else did it. Then another big one that always bothered me was the drone footage.
Oh, yeah, the gap.
We had drone on station, and so drone was above us for the entire gunfight.
Yes.
And so you see the beginning of the footage, and then there's a big gap, and then it's after. So you see the beginning, there's no middle, which is the actual gunfight, and then the after. So why would they delete that? You know that if it showed what they said happened, that would have been on CNN as well. It would have got leaked. But I became somewhat familiar with drones after that, obviously, when I found that out. And I asked my boys who know a lot more about it than I do, and they said that's not the way that drones work. They fill up, and it gets rid of the oldest footage. And it doesn't really get rid of it.
Yeah.
They store it.
Yes.
It turns to metadata.
Yeah.
And so they can still access that. And guess what? We put out FOIA requests for it. Ain't seen it.
Yeah.
And we won't ever see it because they don't want the truth to come out. They don't want it to show Iraqi police engaging us.
Yeah, and there's this fascinating thing that happens, I think, within these cases where it starts out, well, this is bad for international relations because of the Iraqi police. But then once they start covering stuff up, it's like any lie. The lie just has to get bigger. And now you have to cover up the fact that you lied. Now you have to cover up the fact that you lied about lying. And now you have to cover up the other thing. So it ends up being the vice president saying, like, we will get this guy because it's too embarrassing if we don't.
And that's what
situation.
That's what's so great about Gina. You know, like she. Sometimes I wish she wouldn't do it, but she just like champions the fact that she's a liberal. Like she just champions that fact. You know, I'm like, oh, here we go. But I love her because she set that aside
and dug into the story.
She looked at it objectively, and then took her about 5 minutes of reading court transcripts to be like, there's no way.
Yeah.
These are constitutional violations. You cannot have a witness that you know that is going to lie and put them on the stand. Yeah. That's called a Giglio violation.
Yeah, so
you're not allowed to do that. A Brady violation means they withhold evidence that it is exculpatory, which basically just means evidence that proves you're innocent. They were allowed to do all these things that wouldn't have held up during a normal trial, but because the Iraqis need justice, we don't have no constitutional protections.
Yeah.
And so we got, and I mean, look at me. I look mean, I guess. People say that all the time. But like, they just painted me out as this monster and like, that had nothing to do with that day.
I remember in the court of public opinion, just the circular reasoning, like, how do we know that he's bad? Because he worked for Blackwater.
That's right.
How do we know Blackwater's bad? Because it hires people like him. Like,
That's right.
I saw that going back and forth. But while this is happening, kind of three things are happening to you. Number one, you're in prison, which is rough. Number two, you know the facts because you were there. But number three, as better lawyers come on, you are learning more about the injustice that is being done to you. Like, you probably didn't even know all the different ways that your rights were being violated. At the beginning, you just knew you didn't do it. And
that's right.
You kept getting exonerated, and they kept coming back with fresh procedures or fresh charges. And you keep learning about new ways in which this is further injustice. And you say this is strengthening your faith at the time.
Definitely. And I remember... So the jury hung in the second trial. That means some of them wanted to convict me, some of them did not, and they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. And so government had about a week to decide whether or not they would retry.
Mm-hmm.
And my lawyers, in the meantime, they're like, "Will you take a polygraph?" I was like, "Absolutely." And so they don't just hire this normal polygraph, average Joe guy. You know, they hire this dude who has recently retired and started his own contracting company. He was the head FBI polygraph examiner for the Washington, D.C. field office. So he's like the tippy top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he comes in there and he's this big old dude, you know, and he's just like looking at me and he's like, "Listen, son." And I'm like, "Oh, here we go." And he's like, "I've been doing this for a long time. I'm going to know if you're lying. So let's not waste my time here." And I was like, "I didn't do it. You can ask me as many ways as you want to. I didn't do it."
Mm-hmm.
And so he's just like, "All right." And so he hooks me up. I don't know if you've ever taken a polygraph,
but
it's kind of intimidating because they hook you up to all this stuff.
That's half of how it works.
Yeah. And so like they hook you up, and at the end of it, he goes, they run 2 algorithms. I forget what they're called. Like one is like John Hopkins, and I forget what the other algorithm is called, but it's like no deception indicated on both of them. And he looks at me, he goes, "I am so sorry. You did not do this." And I was like, "I told you." And so they file that with the court, which polygraphs are not admissible in court. The reason being is because most defendants fail them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why they're not admissible. And they filed it anyway. And so the government got mad and they like moved that it be sealed from public view. And the judge granted it that it would be sealed so people couldn't see it. And they decided to press forward with the case. But before they did, they offered me 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
They offered me time served, which I had 4 years and some change, I think, by that time. So it was basically like, if you will say that you did this, you can walk right out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, tell them to drop the charges, tell them I'm innocent. And they went forward. And
How tempting was it, though?
it wasn't tempting at all because I felt like God would not honor it.
Yeah.
I really...
Because it would be a lie.
And also it would be like, it would put my boys in jeopardy too, because their conviction...
so many of these things are connected and hinge on each other. And
my conviction was completely vacated. So that means it starts all over again. I don't have a conviction. Mm-hmm. Their convictions were upheld, but their sentences were vacated. So they had to be re-sentenced. So what is it going to look like if all of a sudden I plead guilty and then they got to be re-sentenced, you know? So I wasn't even entertaining the idea.
Yeah.
But I remember the third trial, they were allowed to lie. They were allowed to hide evidence. Even the judge who hated my guts because I basically told him that just he didn't know what he was doing and that he was letting me go down for something I did not do. And like, he hated me, but he called the lead prosecutor a liar. And so once you call a prosecutor a liar, that pretty much ends their career. So during the third trial, there was all these things, and they were allowed to manipulate the witnesses. So basically you have a trial that happened months before, and then a witness is able to completely change his story in that short amount of time. And the judge is just like, he's kicking everybody out of the courtroom. We're having all these private conferences that I'm pretty sure are illegal the way that they operated, just scratching their head trying to salvage this case. But anyway, they end up finding me guilty. Mm-hmm. And so that was the time you were asking about, you know, God and how do you feel? And like,
because
bro, I was so mad. I was so mad when they found me guilty. And I remember I was in DC jail, which is one of the worst jails you can be at, especially to go to trial. Like, it's just crazy. Like, people got stabbed right outside my cell. Mm-hmm. And so it's nuts. And I remember I still
think it's marginally safer than parts of D.C. that are not in the federal prison system.
I don't know. I've never been there, but I only got to see the jail. So, But I was walking back to my cell, and they treated me like Hannibal Lecter there. Mm-hmm. Belly chain, shackles on my feet everywhere I went. And so he's marching me back to my cell. I'm like, "Hey, I just got convicted and I'm going to get a life sentence. Do you care if I call somebody?" He's like, "Yes." He's like, "Go." He's like, so he uncuffed me. They were very kind to me. The guards were. He put me in the rec room, and he's like, "Yeah, you know, take all the time you need, you know, just holler at me when you're done." And so I was so like upset, and I was talking to God as I was moving towards the phone. And the whole time I had been in there, any chance I got to talk to prisoners about Jesus. And that's how you do a life sentence. You don't focus on yourself. You focus on other people. Because if you focus on yourself, you'll go crazy. Sure, you study your case like you were talking about. You learn the legal system. You do all that kind of stuff. But I was more concerned whether or not they were going to go to hell. Like, that's what I was concerned about. Do you know Jesus? That was my main question for my people that I was locked up with in there. And as I'm going to the phone, I reach out to grab the phone. And as I reach out, that verse comes to mind where Jesus says, whoever puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, he straight up told me that I've got somebody else I need to talk to in here. There's somebody else I'm going to meet. And what's crazy is I got moved to a different jail, got to talk to multiple people, and I'm still in contact with them today, and they got saved, you know? So it's like, he was using me. That's what I really, if anything comes out of this about my side of the story, is I want people to understand that it doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter what you've done or what you haven't done. What it matters is that if you will submit to Jesus, he will use you.
Yes.
If you will submit to him, he will put people in front of you that need to hear a word about him. So I get on the phone with a different attitude, right? I call my girlfriend at the time, and she's distraught. And I'm like, everything's great. I'm like, I'm blessed. Like, if you ask me how I'm doing, I'll be like, I'm blessed. You know, always, like, no matter what's going on. But I'm just like, God is not done with me in here. Mm-hmm. When he is, I will walk right out the door. And that's eventually what happened, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a couple of years later, 3 years later, that you got a presidential pardon. And yeah, what were you? I mean, you were depending on the Lord to provide you with opportunities to serve him, and just believing in his sovereignty that he was going to put you where you needed to be, and that was going to be wherever you were. So
he always did it.
Yeah.
He always came through, for sure.
Yeah. So what's next? You're doing podcasts. You are, you have this book here. I think you have a very important story across a whole number of fields. I mean, there's guys here that would love to talk to you more about some military stuff. There's guys that would love to talk to you about just the prosecutorial attitude of the federal government. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can talk about, but I think that the gospel message is such an important part of this story. I just am blown away by, you know, we all have the saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole. Like, of course, as you are sure that the sniper bullet is on its way, you will call out to the Lord. But is that a life-changing moment, or is that just a, oh, phew, that was close moment? Like, the constant pressure of injustice being done against you really being the thing that brings you closer to the Lord is, I think that's a great encouragement. Even to people who are not in that position, just to know that the goodness of God is there to support people even in that soul-crushing situation. And I think that is every bit a supernatural providence of God, just as much as the bullet missing you, or the Apache showing up on time, or the shrapnel miraculously going all around you, and, you know, all the other stories that we hear about from combat. The spiritual sustainment is just as much the hand and mercy of God.
Yeah, if you know what God's name means, Yahweh, it literally means the in and the out breath. Mm-hmm. So every time we breathe, it's because he allows it. So whether you believe or you don't believe, he's providing your breath. Mm-hmm. So if you can remember that, like multiple times a day, you know, it's hard. They say I got traumatic brain injury. They say I got post-traumatic stress. They say I've got all these things that are wrong with me. But multiple times a day, I will just stop whatever I'm doing, and I will say, thank you, Jesus, for saving me. Mm-hmm. Because that's all that's going to matter.
Yes.
Is do you know Jesus or don't you know Jesus? Mm-hmm. And so that's my mission in life, you know, is just the people he puts in front of me, I'm going to tell them, you know, that Jesus will save you if you ask, bro. Like, I mean, it's simple as that. It's not a Charles Stanley sermon. You know, it's not Billy Graham. It's just, hey, Jesus will save you if you ask. And the Holy Spirit is really good at his job. If you tell somebody that, it gives them an option, yes or no. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's another question. What are you hoping to do now that this book is out and your story is getting wider? I know that you have a passion for preaching the gospel and just giving people that message, but there are other people who are victims of injustice that haven't gotten a presidential pardon yet. You were pardoned by Trump right at the very end of his last term, and he pardoned a bunch of folks at the beginning of this current term, and I expect he'll pardon people at the end of his next term. But there are a number of injustices that need to be dealt with. So we've talked about a few people. Actually, there's a local guy right here in Centerville who was convicted under the last administration on a face charge. He organized a protest at a abortion clinic, which is like 10 times worse than actually protesting, like telling people on Facebook where it is, not allowed. So he was convicted and refused the plea deal and was pardoned by Trump pretty early on in Trump's second term. So there's a lot of injustice that needs to be dealt with. As you have been through the ringer of this system and you've learned a little bit more about it, and you've learned a little bit more about other cases like yours, who are some of the people that you're aware of that you want to raise awareness for?
I'd say everyone go to freecalvingibbs.com. Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs is serving a life sentence in Leavenworth. He's been locked up since 2010. And basically, he is locked up for killing a member of the Taliban. He's charged with 3 counts of murder. 2 of the counts of murder, he wasn't even at the scene when those individuals were killed. But all 3 members were Taliban. So it was the Maiwan district. Anybody that's ever been to Afghanistan knows that if you are a military-age male, you have to be in the Taliban. So, like, he was in a hostile, non-permissive environment, and they had him running village stability operations, which do not work in a hostile, non-permissive environment, right?
And they invite criticism from local Taliban people that don't want local stability. Yes.
Yeah, and then, so Calvin Gibbs, I'd encourage everybody, freecalvingibbs.com. I've been fighting for him. I think I found out about his case about 2 years after I got out. And so he's one. And then Bob Bales is another one that I like to mention, but his case is a little bit different. He actually did what they said he did, but his is more of a mental health issue. He had 3 combat deployments, and, his family's like, Bob, you ain't right in the head. You need to get help. So he was going to the Army psychiatry, and they had him on prescription medicine, which makes him non-deployable, and all this kind of stuff that he had going on. And then they get orders to deploy back to Afghanistan, and Bob tells his company commander straight up, I can't go. I'm not right. And for an infantryman that's like a leader to say that, it takes a lot out of you to be like, I can't do this no more. It's really hard to come to terms with your own limitations, especially in that alpha male type personality, right? But Bob was honest, and he's like, I'm not fit to serve. And they just deployed him anyway. And then, so the first time that his soldiers got hit with an EFB, he went to the only 2 villages that were local, and both of those are Taliban-controlled areas, and he just annihilated everybody, and his is... I don't talk about his as much because I don't want to get him and Cal confused. But I think because a lot of people will lump everybody together, it kind of blurs together. Cal and Bob are 2 different situations, but Cal is actually innocent. Bob did it, but
because of the
they should not have had him over there.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many warning signs before he actually did what he did. And they were also giving him a prescription medicine at the time that was for malaria, and there's been a lot of lawsuits come out against that drug, that if you give it to somebody who has a traumatic brain injury, that it makes them highly likely to be homicidal or suicidal. And so in Bob's case, it was homicidal. So, I mean, you've got, at what point do you have chain of command responsible versus individual action? And that's just why I really advocate for Bob as well, because I feel like those are the only two that I'm aware of right now that are sitting in Leavenworth that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And if you let them go, they wouldn't be a threat to society.
Right. Yeah.
They would be, you know, like everyone else has already got out. Most people took a deal. The thing that immediately drew me to Calvin Gibbs is he refused to plead deal. Everybody else, they made a movie about him called The Kill Team. Everybody else in his team pled guilty.
Yeah.
He's the only one that's like, I've done crazy stuff in war. He's like, I've done stuff that I regret in war. He's like, but I never murdered anyone. And so like he was not going to plead guilty to murder. And so that really drew me to his case. And he's sitting there in Leavenworth, and if he'd have done what he did in World War II, he'd have got medals. And so you see the difference in politics, how it shifted, where we were prosecuting guys. And if you just look at individual actions, you're like, okay, Calvin is legit. Bob actually did it. But I'm looking at commander's intent as well.
Yeah.
If your soldier tells you he's not fit and you make him deploy anyway, you just fudge the paperwork that he's on prescription psych meds.
Yeah.
Like that never made it into Bob's trials.
Yeah.
None
it's
of
a
that
fascinating thing. I mean, this kind of goes back a little bit to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Part of the reason that these private military companies become such a big deal in the beginning of the global war on terror is the system is so big and bureaucratic. We've built a federal system that is so big and so complicated that it will hurt people by accident, and it will also hurt people on purpose.
Yeah.
And so calling out these things is really important to actually maintain freedoms and constitutional rights and all of the things that that we really have as a country been able to depend on and needed to depend on in order to build the kind of country that we have. And so it is such a shame when the government's only two real jobs are to fight the nation's enemies justly and deal with domestic criminals justly. And so seeing this system do the opposite of both of those things simultaneously, fight foreign wars unjustly, and then treat the people that do that as criminals unjustly is just such a violation of those rights and those principles that I think it is a very useful, not only is it important that justice be done in those individual cases, but I think that's a great place to shine light and just talk about what other abuses are happening, what other weaknesses are happening, what other areas have we built big, complex, unmanageable, unaccountable systems like the ones that we find here. So I want to thank you very much for, after everything that you've been through, I can imagine that there's a million things that you could do, and some are probably more appealing to others, but continuing to talk about this and continuing to talk about other people's cases and so forth, I really appreciate it. I think it is a really important thing to do, and not just say, I've had enough of dealing with this situation and I'd like to never talk about it again. I think that would be understandable, but I appreciate that you're continually bringing it up and trying to get it better known and better understood.
God is good. We've got to remind people that war costs. If you look at the veteran suicide rate,
Yes.
way more veterans are killing themselves than actually died in combat. And it's because of the mentality that has been pushed out to the local populace here in America that we were fighting these unjust wars, right?
Yes.
And so that's a real hard thing for us to swallow. Mm-hmm. And you see that our fighting men and women should never have to choose between a casket or a prison cell. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen it over there in Baghdad where upgunners were afraid to engage because if they got it wrong, they might be incarcerated. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
They got a car coming at them, and they're like, "Well, I better get it right," and then they get blown up because that hesitation gets you killed, right?
Yeah.
So we shouldn't operate that way. We've already lost if we're going to fight our wars that way.
Yeah. And there should always be, obviously, careful, positive target identification. But in these cases that I'm familiar with, it's always like, well, the rules of engagement keep changing. And the issue isn't, do I get it wrong? The issue is, does a politician or a bureaucrat decide that it's more convenient to use me as a scapegoat?
Yeah, they changed the rules after the fact, like they did with us.
Yeah.
You know, like our rules of engagement was if it's objectively reasonable at the time, not in the matter of hindsight, not when you're out of danger and you're back in the rear and you're like, okay, maybe I should have done that different. No, at the time, in the moment, when bullets are cracking over your head, is this objectively reasonable? You tell me what objectively reasonable is in that time when people are shooting at you.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. Like that was our rules of engagement. So,
yeah. Well, it's going to be a fascinating thing to, I feel like there's a lot to unwind in this system. I was talking to a Vietnam veteran a few weeks ago, and I was talking about when I was my kid's age, there were old World War II guys that we grew up talking to, and they were respected, and Vietnam guys, not the same. And so now that my kids, I want them to get to know and talk to and hear stories, helpful, useful, encouraging stories from guys that served in Vietnam, but they have been so kind of beaten down.
That's right.
That there aren't the same level of World War II events that there were when I was a kid for them. And we have this very interesting thing now with GWAT vets where everyone thanks you for your service. Like nobody spits on you the way that Vietnam guys got spit on. But that doesn't mean that there's a level of respect or understanding or appreciation. There's just the kind of the lip service that makes it feel like, yeah, we're being nice to our veteran population. Like there's this, it kind of goes back to a thing that we talk about at T-Rex all the time. There is this such clear-cut divide between military and civilian that really shouldn't exist. When you pretend like it exists and it doesn't actually, and you create these really harsh, bright lines that can't exist, it's very awkward for guys like you. You're not in the military right now, but you were. So that's messy. That shouldn't exist. Easier to solve this problem some other way with court cases,
For our future, I would just tell all the young ones, keep your eyes on Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if we ever lose sight of Jesus as a nation, we will fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In God we trust.
Yeah.
We have to keep our eyes on Jesus because he is all that's going to matter.
Yes.
My first thing every morning before my feet hit the floor, I read Psalms 91. And then I'm calling out to my dad. And I'm like, hey, I can't be kind. I can't be good. I need you to help me.
Yes.
I need you to show up. I need you to guide me. I need you to put people in front of me. And I need you to give me the words to say. And he does that. That's not a hard thing for God to do. And I think our nation, I know where I go to church, we have seen a surge of children come into the Lord. So I'm not losing faith in our country,
right. Yeah.
Because I believe that we are on the up. I don't believe we're on the down. I think
there's stuff we've got to fix.
Yeah.
But we know that we serve a God who can fix anything.
I mean, if you really believe God created everything with a word, do you think there's anything we got going on that he can't handle, right?
Exactly.
I think a lot of times, he really laid it out to me simple like that. I mean, I'm just a dumb country boy from Sparta, Like, he has to break things down real simple, right? And he's like, I created everything with a word. You don't think I can get you out of prison?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he did. Like, who gets pardoned by the president? I'm not a senator's son. I'm nobody special, right? And God can do anything, man.
Yeah.
So I would just say that anybody that's watching this and
despairing at the work that has yet to be done, don't despair.
Yeah, and especially for the young ones, man, because they're the future.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep your eyes on Jesus. He will save you if you ask him, and then he will guide you for the rest of your life. And don't be like me and don't rebel and don't run your own way. Like,
But even so, he's given you a work to do. Like,
yeah,
if you told anybody like, hey, you need to, your job is going to be to expose corruption at the highest levels of government and problems in the military system and private military, it's like, you wouldn't know how to go about doing that.
no,
But that's what you're doing.
God is good. He can do anything.
Yes, sir. Amen. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really appreciate you working with Gina to get the story into this book. And I really appreciate that you're continuing to tell the story. And my hope would be that you just continue to, get traction. I know I'm expecting that you're going to keep your hand on the plow, but I just want to see the Lord open doors, give you more traction, because there's a lot of work to do. And I appreciate the steadfast manner that you've been going about that this last little while. So thanks for coming and hanging out with us too today. It's been a while since we talked, but it's been good to catch up. And Sparta's not that far away, so it's good to have you as a neighbor too.
That's right. God is good, brother. God bless you. I appreciate you having me.